First thing I'd like to say is thank you very much for being invited, and the second thing I'd like to say is I'd like to pay a little bit of tribute to the Heritage Council actually for some work that they did with us in the past. It led straight on to a World Award for us as a community in our Heritage Trail, and it was without a doubt, without them and without actually our Heritage Officer in County Clare, an awful lot of what has happened since wouldn't have happened. So I do want to make that acknowledgement. Who's using who? Putting the community at the heart of destination development. I have a script, and there's a very good reason why I have a script, because normal people tell a story like that at the top. This is how I get sidetracked, and then 20 minutes becomes half an hour, and then Liam gets really cranky with me. I've long been an advocate of placing community at the heart of destination development. I believe tourism should service the community needs rather than the other way around. And that has meant I'm almost always been at odds with the more traditional thinkers within the industry. But the world has changed. Globally, tourism numbers hit 1 billion in 2012. And in 2018 we hit over 1.4 billion international arrivals. And the strategy to deal with that is dispersal through regionality and seasonality. But what happens if we continue to think traditionally about tourism development without changing our methods or planning for a different result? We just simply end up with the same issue at a different place and a different time of year. It's almost heretical to question any statement about how valuable tourism is to our local economy and to job creation. We're told it's a soft industry with almost no negative impacts. But the fact of the matter, that it is an indigenous industry and that it cannot be moved offshore. The fact of the matter of those statements are all open to question and in many instances are patently untrue. Tourism is an extractive industry. And while that may sound radical, it's an opinion that's been around for a while. This definition is from 1994. And between then and now, little has changed. Tourism collects the rent, whilst rarely contributing to maintaining the asset. But that asset, the destination within which tourism occurs, and the host community who live there, is the single most important asset that the tourism industry has. So if we want to have a sustainable tourism industry, we need to create a sustainable tourism destination, and that will only be done if we focus on what is needed to ensure the sustainability of the local community. So I'm just going to talk about a small community in County Clare that did just that. The Loophead Peninsula is a small triangle of land that sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean. We're almost completely surrounded by protected areas, about 140 kilometres square, and we have 3,500 people who live there, midway along the west of Ireland on the Wild Atlantic Way. Loophead Tourism is a completely voluntary organisation. 3 parishes working together, which is pretty groundbreaking stuff in its own in Ireland. I think we deserve an award for that in its own. We have a committee of 9 drawn from the development associations of those 3 parishes, 3 from each, regardless of population size, business numbers or political power, to ensure continued buy-in for the future. Our economy predominantly relies on farming, although this is becoming less prevalent, and our single biggest export for the last 150 years has been our people, and in particular our young people. We are one of the more marginalised communities in County Clare. On a more positive note, we are surrounded by some of the most spectacular scenery on the west of Ireland, and we have an unparalleled cultural and heritage product. So it is easy to see why tourism could be seen as the most realistic option left for economic development. But how do we make sure that tourism does actually deliver for us, the community who live there? How do we make sure that we don't end up just being the place where tourism happens and the monetary transactions take place many, many miles away? We consider tourism too precious a local community asset to allow it to be sold to the lowest bidder. It is really actually the only asset we have left. So we have to radically rethink our perception of tourism and the way it works. And we focused on these 3 things. The model, the metrics we use for the model for development, the metrics we use for measuring its success, and the marketing we used. So we switched from what I call a marketing-led, which is the traditional marketing-led model of tourism, to a community development-led model. This shift in thinking meant that we realised actually that tourism itself was not the goal. It's just a tool, and one that if we used properly could deliver sustainable community for our coastal community. Two relatively simple and efficient ways of using this tool to deliver what mattered to us is to maximise the linkages between our businesses and to minimise the leakage from our local economy. Now the first one is, it's the fancy term for getting people to work together, creating a network. I cannot stress the importance of this. We have to stop thinking of each other as the competition. I have a restaurant. That's my business. My wife and I own a restaurant. I had to stop thinking about the restaurant across the road being my competitor. And we had to start working together to make the town a foodie destination. It's a pretty hard thing to do. But we can't even begin to have that conversation until we start to trust each other a little bit. And I'm a huge fan of project-based collaboration. I think nothing beats getting 6 or 8 people in a room together and getting to work on a project, because then they start to trust each other. So we went out and we found a project, the European Destination of Excellence, in 2010. The theme was aquatic tourism. We entered it and we put a small group of people together, all based around the sea. We took them on this very tightly focused and quite short timeline project, and we won it. And yep, the win was great. It showed us that we had something really worthwhile. It gave us external validation. But the real benefit came from us showing that competing businesses can actually sit into a room together and work with each other. And by doing what we said we would do. So somebody promised to do something, they came through on it. We built up a trust between ourselves. Another example is this. It's Ireland. There must be a party somewhere. So we set up this thing called the Bootleggers Ball, and we run it every year. And basically a local hotel gives us their building for the night. All the local chefs from the local restaurants take over the kitchen. People like me do front of house. And we take maybe 150 or 60 people, €50 a ticket. It gives us a brilliant night out. It's a real social occasion. It's kind of the black tie ball of the area for the night. And it's a real Christmas kickoff. And we raised €5,000 for our marketing fund. But the result here again is competing businesses working together in a high stress environment. Chefs in the kitchen from 6 or 8 different restaurants, making sure everything has to be on time and has to be working together. One of the outputs for that has been the restaurants in Kilkee now closing a rota. So none of us, there's marginal nights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We close Sunday, Monday, other restaurants close Monday, Tuesday, someone else closes Tuesday and Wednesday. The town is open, but businesses are not competing with each other for the marginal nights. So we've delivered this, the town is open from Valentine's until the end of October. So you can always get a nice meal in a nice restaurant, but we're just not killing each other for Monday night. And then everybody shuts down and visitors arrive and there's nothing to eat. So it's that sort of stuff. The second part, and this is where this is the bit that really ticks my box, and it comes back to the sustainability and food miles and all those sort of things. Addressing the leakage from our local economy. I use this image of a leaky bucket to represent the economy of the Loophead Peninsula. The water flowing in is the tourism income stream, and all these little holes in it are the money that leaves our local economy in raw goods, services, wages, etc. That is the leakage. It's also the difference between the money taken by an external operator and how much of that they leave behind. So, for instance, the Cliffs of Moher is sold as a day trip in Dublin for €40. They pay €3 at the gate. So that's €37 that we're not reaping the reward of. We are, however, getting all the CO2 emissions from tailpipes. If our objective is to fill up the bucket, well, how do we go about that? Well, standard tourism development strategies are marketing driven, tend to focus on finding more and more taps, to keep pouring water in faster than it leaks out. It's wasteful, it's inefficient and expensive. We're paying twice. First of all to find the taps, and second of all to clean up the mess on the floor. Or we can look at it differently and do what we did at Loophead by taking a community development approach. by trying to block up the holes. So we encourage our businesses to look at their purchasing and wage practices, where they are spending their money, and asking them, can they change that? I did a little exercise with my own accountant. 71% of my purchasing remains within County Clare in the restaurant. 100% of my wage bill is paid within 10 miles of my front door. These are simple sums for any business. They're accounted to look it up at the end of the year. You know where your suppliers are. It's very simple stuff. But it gives me a target. One of the things it did was highlighted 3 possibilities where I could switch from a supplier in Cork or Dublin to one in Clare. Coffee, beer, and I can't remember what the third one is. But that's sparking the change. But we have to know those things first. So blocking the leaks means we need less tourists to deliver more benefit to our local economy. Less tourists need lower levels of resources and an industry that is much easier to manage. It's lighter on our landscape. It has less negative consequences on our local community. So what are the tricks we used? Food is a hugely important part of the visitor experience and a great way of creating a link between the visitor, the producer and the place. It's also a really good example of where we can reduce the leakage. Loophead Food Circle, we designed this really simple mechanism. So we put a lighthouse symbol beside products on our menu that come from our local community. It's an immediate visual signal to the visitor that they can buy this piece of fish comes from a local, or this beef, or whatever it is. It increased sales to our local producers by about €150,000 a year and added 10 jobs into our local community. It's simple stuff. It's not rocket science. It just takes commitment and trust, which is the hard bit. Another thing we can do is to think really strategically about the downstream effect of a development or attraction. So the Loophead Lighthouse began just after the Eden win in 2010. We were asked on board as partners, and of course we wanted to know how the development of the lighthouse was going to deliver against what we defined as success, driving and adding value to our local economy. So we insisted from the outset there would be no craft shop or cafe at the lighthouse, which is pretty radical. I think it may be the only visitor attraction in the world still without a coffee shop. But at the time there's a local pub at the bottom of the hill about to close. It's now open 10 months of the year with 10 staff. 2 local women opened this business about a mile from the lighthouse. It was the first bricks and mortar business built in the village of Kilmallock in over 100 years. It employs 5 people. I keep telling them, I use them as an exemplar all the time, and they keep telling me that to make sure that I tell you all that they do ship worldwide. So, 10 years ago, when we set up Loophead Tourism, to ensure tourism development of our home would happen only as and when and in what direction we, the community, wanted. Back then, we were considered to be those crazy nut jobs out there at the end of the peninsula. We are now an internationally recognised, multi-award-winning responsible tourism destination, used by, among others, the World Bank as a best practice model for others to replicate. We have created an atmosphere which encourages the development of micro-enterprises, and we now have a network of over 40 locally owned and operated businesses, each of whom pay a membership fee of €240 per year to be part of the network. So that's the model change. Next thing, we're going to look at some metrics. We have to measure tourism in a different way. It is no longer appropriate to take the easy route and simply measure the volumes of visitors. Large numbers of visitors are absolutely no guarantee the local economy is benefiting. This hotel here doesn't measure how many rooms, its profitability by how many rooms are full. Profitability has other factors into it. It's easy to fill the rooms. Just advertise them for no money. And you're full and you're busy, but are you making money? So this is a Fáilte Ireland map. 70% of tourism takes place in 30% of the country. This other one is come from the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation and shows the overseas visitor spend by region. As you can see, the west and southwest of Ireland are the most visited parts of the country, really. And look at where the blue is the southwest, the green is Dublin. So look at where the spending is happening and looking where the spending is not happening. I think that's just a really good visual representation of volume doesn't mean value. And all of this is happening while tourism numbers have gone through the roof. Internationally, or the value has gone through the roof, the number of visitors has gone through the roof. When we talk of Irish destinations, Clare is up there as a superstar in Irish tourism destinations. We're the spiritual home of traditional Irish music. Bunratty Castle and the Cliffs of Moher have a combined footfall of over 2 million. Huge numbers, so no surprise then when we see that Clare is the 5th most visited in Ireland and the 6th highest spend related to overseas visitors in Ireland. But when we do the sums, we find that we're 24th out of 26 in average spend per head. So we're become, in effect, a drive-to destination. But that's because of how we've sold ourselves. We also have one of the lower amounts of hotel accommodation in the west of Ireland. And that's where the real jobs are. That's where the stickiness happens. People have to stay in a place because now they have to eat and drink and visit other things and do things. But we're told that the benefits will trickle down, and the trouble with that is that's supposed to be how it works, but that's generally how we do find it does work. We have to start measuring tourism not by visitor numbers, but how efficient it is in creating prosperity, employment, a healthy environment and benefits to our local communities. We have to measure what matters locally. That's the most significant thing. We have to find out what matters locally, and that's the measurement for success. Marketing. We have to completely change how we market. We have to think that using small places to market the island of Ireland in an international marketplace is grossly irresponsible, because what we're going to end up with is just putting millions of people into places that are singularly incapable of dealing with them. There's examples from all over the world. It's Pulpit Rock. This is how it's sold. That's what you get when you get there. Venice. This is what we're sold by the cruise line industry. That's what happens when you get there. Screen tourism is a huge example of how this happens. Northern Ireland. I'm actually doing some work with the National Trust at the minute in Northern Ireland. Game of Thrones and the Dark Ages. That's the reality on the ground. Mamma Mia in the island, in the Greek island where it was filmed, is now almost uninhabitable by local community, and the Croatian island that Mamma Mia 2 filmed at is heading that way too. Star Wars was filmed along the west of Ireland and was the basis of a huge marketing campaign by Tourism Ireland. And by their own metrics for success, it has been phenomenal successful. Shares and impressions, award after award. There are similar metrics. Pulpit Rock was used by Mission Impossible. One quote from a marketing executive was that they were delighted to have had a reach of over 350 million. The trouble, though, is that this is the consequence of that marketing on the ground in Ireland. This is the consequence in Pulpit Rock. Maybe if we were starting to measure things differently by how many rescues had to be made, by the cost of repatriating, remediating the landscape, these wouldn't be so successful. Loophead was also used in Star Wars. We, on purpose, explicitly refused to allow Loophead to be used in that campaign because we understood the consequences of that marketing on our community. And that's about confidence. That's about having confidence in your place and saying, no, not everything is right. Just because it can be marketed doesn't mean it should. That's the scene from Loophead. We just explored other angles, and we ended up in a series of guidebooks that were the target market for the type of people we wanted to have coming. So that type of community-led model shifts to a more responsible marketing, and that means capacity building communities so they understand there are consequences and what they may be to how their place is marketed, and to give them the confidence to allow them to decide the sort of story that should be told about their home and of who is allowed to tell it. The basis of developing a sustainable destination is undertaking processes like this one I called, and this is what we're using in the north of Ireland at the minute with the community around the Giant's Causeway. It's persistent inquiry. So we start asking lots of questions of the community so we can plan out an industry that will avoid repeating the same mistakes and identify potential issues in the future and to create a sustainable destination. The first questions many communities ask is, how do we get more tourists? But it's the completely wrong question to ask. The first question we have to ask is, why do we want them? What is their purpose? What is the purpose of tourism for this community? We have to define a role for it. We then work through others, such as what would success look like? Define it. Define it in 5 years, define it in 10 years. Now you have something to measure against and you have a step to work to. What assets do the community have that are an individual or a community have, or control, that could deliver on this success? Where and when is appropriate for visitors to visit, and where and when actually do the community feel isn't? Who should be here at these discussions? Who isn't here and why not? Farmers, I often find, tend to be absent from the discussion about tourism development, but they're the biggest landowners. Who do we want to be visiting our homes? Because we cannot forget that actually it is our home. It's not a destination. Here's a quote I'd like you to have a think about. People are slowly waking up to the fact we're not going to run out of tourists. It is environmentally sound and attractive destinations that are becoming scarce. People will not stop moving around the globe, they will just do it more selectively. That was made in 2012 by a guy called Tony Goldman. There are the figures since 2012 to 2017. So obviously we're not running out of tourists. We're actually facing a tidal wave of them. And that provides us with opportunity, but it also provides a significant threat as the development and marketing agencies come under pressure to spread out that load. Like this just popped up yesterday. This is a festival we're running on the Luped Peninsula. If you take a look at that and look at what's available to public on this festival, it gives you a brilliant snapshot of the type of things we have developed in Luped over the last 10 years and our focus of the type of industry we want. Every one of those requires a time investment from the visitor. You cannot simply rock up on a bus, take a photograph and disappear. These events speak of who we are and of what we value. And we're actually out there to try and get to match people to those values. I think that's a really important message that people should take away from today, is confidence and about matching your values and allowing only people who have those values to come to your place. You have a spectacular town here. It shouldn't be just a place where there's a park and ride at the entrance to the town and the money is being taken in Dublin by whatever company is selling it. Rock up and an hour later they're gone, and what have they left? A couple of quid at the entry and maybe a postcard. What you have is too valuable to just allow it to be used by that. I tend to finish with a blank sheet of paper because I think a lot of people, it's your story. You have an opportunity to write it. A lot of other destinations in the world don't have that right. It's been written for them. They don't have that luxury. We started out with a blank sheet of paper. We are where we are now because that's where we want to be, and we planned for it to happen. I think you're pretty similar lines, so I would wish you the best. Thank you.